Hey everyone, welcome back in. It's Bleav and Vikings with Wabi back on the air for today, Tuesday, July 30th, as Vikings training camp and all NFL training camps roll on here in advance of the 2024 regular season. Definitely getting to the point with pads on now where we can start to formulate some opinions and make some observations. So excited to continue that conversation with you. And today we'll do it with a special guest, our first guest on Bleav in Vikings since we started these episodes at the launch of training camp. It's Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus. We'll get to him in a minute. Let's take care of some homework first, though. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of their over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code Bleav, B-L-E-A-V. Use promo code Bleav for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online. The game starts here. Prepare for the 2024 NFL season like a pro with PFF Plus. Unlock world-class analysis, premium fantasy tools, betting advice, and more from the leader in football analytics. Visit PFF.com for more information. Once you do that, one of the experts you'll undoubtedly find enlightening and entertaining is Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus lead draft analyst and co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. You can find Trevor on X at Tampa Bay Trey, T-R-E. You can find him on Bleav in Vikings right now. Welcome in, Trevor. How's it going, bud?
Dude, it's going well. I'm excited. You mentioned at the top, it's training camp is in full swing. We're basically at the preseason now, right?
Yep.
So I'm excited to talk a little ball with you here.
So we can pick up on the fact that you like college football, you like the draft, and you like the NFL because you're the lead draft analyst at PFF and PFF.com. Yes. Tell us about the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. What do you guys do there?
Sure. Yeah. So that's sort of a marrying of a lot of those things. Myself and my co-host Connor Rogers, basically year round, we cover college football and the NFL from an NFL draft lens. So, for example, right now we're in the summertime and we're doing summer scouting. So we're getting people ready for the upcoming college football season because, there's a lot of people out there who like the NFL draft, but college football is such a big beast and you never know, hey, who do I really pay attention to? Who's actually going to be a draftable type of prospect? And so we are giving people a position by position breakdown of some of the guys that are draft eligible for the upcoming year. So we're going, like I said, position by position. We give you our summer scouting rankings, what we like about these guys, where we think they can improve, whether we think it's sort of like physical limitations or maybe it's just technical stuff that we think they can get better at. So we break down all that. And then we're doing that through summer scouting. And then obviously during the college football regular season, we're keeping tabs on when guys are improving, how they're improving, where their stock is going. We do a lot of stock up, stock down, as you could tell on the NFL Stock Exchange. Yep. But of course, once we get into draft season, it's a lot of the content that people are very familiar with that they love. The player fits for teams, the combine results, mock drafts, all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And the path, the arc that you follow, Trevor, is similar to some NFL teams in some respects because, I was with the Vikings for 15 years and I would, the draft would get over and I was on the content side of the business, not the football side. But, the draft would get over and there's a lot of cross-pollination and fraternization there between the content folks and the football folks. So the draft gets over. Seventh round is over. They're doing undrafted free agency. We might go to a bar or brewery or something like that and have a beverage or two to just take it easy for 6 hours.
Sure.
But some of the scouts, the next week, they're off and hitting the road. They're getting ready for the next draft, and I'm sure you've got a little bit of that in your world where you're never really able to take your eye off the ball of the draft, even right after an NFL draft.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't want to. This is something that I do for fun. Obviously it's a job, but when I was coming out of broadcasting school, I graduated from the University of Florida. The way that I sort of put my best foot forward, if you will, is I wrote scouting reports. I wrote mock drafts. It's the thing
Yeah.
that I love the most. I grew up in the early Madden generation. And so beyond just playing the games, the team building part of it was the most fun for me. And that obviously includes the draft process during the off season. And so from a very early age, I've cared a lot about the NFL draft. And so it's something that I hope always comes out in my work, not just how thorough it is and hopefully how right it is more often than it's wrong, but also the fact that I enjoy it. And this
Yeah.
is something that I really enjoy doing.
Yep. You know what? And there's being right, there's being wrong, there's all sorts of that. I mean, you look back on some of your draft profiles and your write-ups on players, and some of them you nail it on the head, and then others you just laugh at yourself. I love Zach Mettenberger as an example. Like, I was all about him, right? And I look back on my write-up of him, and it's like, why would anyone ever listen to this idiot if this was his opinion on Zach Mettenberger, right? So you get that's just part of the process. You can't be right on every player. You mentioned the team building thing, though, and I think about the Vikings through that lens, Trevor. And
Mm-hmm.
I think what we saw in the first round of the draft is maybe the most significant steps taken by Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell in this regime. And the reason I think that is because I think they inherited a pretty good situation, all things considered. Brian O'Neill, Christian Darrisaw, Justin Jefferson. There's some key pieces in place there. But how about the first round this year for the Vikings? You came away from the first round thinking about all 32 teams, and you write up all these players. But as you dove deep into what the Vikings did, and you look at getting two players like they got, what were your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a very interesting sort of study overall when you look at what the Vikings did, I think, throughout this draft process, focusing in on what they needed to focus on. They obviously tried to retain Kirk Cousins, but you don't. And I think that they always realized that there was a possibility that he was going to move on. So throughout the offseason, you're sort of positioning yourself into, okay, well, what do we need to do to potentially get a quarterback? That's the 1st thing that we need to do here and make sure that we solidify. And I think that they, Kevin O'Connell and Adolfo-Mensah did a really good job in identifying that. And it's tough because it was a really good quarterback class. It's a good thing, but they weren't picking in the top 10, right? So it was always going to be a little bit tricky for them. So, Kirk moves on. They end up getting an extra first round pick. So they trade up so they get plenty of ammunition to be able to have all the flexibility they need to get the quarterback that they want. So in a vacuum, I think getting the two players that they did are going to be high impactful guys, right? Obviously, anytime you draft a quarterback in the first round, no matter what their timeline is of when they're going to start, you hope that they're franchise caliber for you. You hope that they're really turning things around for you and they're a great investment. I think pass rush obviously is another premium position in Dallas Turner, one of the most talented pass rushers that we had in this past class. So to get those two players on your team, I think in a vacuum, you say, yes, great moves, right? These are great
Yeah.
moves. They're going to help the team out. But I do think that the point that you brought up is an interesting one because Adolfo-Mensah is very much an analytically driven guy, right? That was sort of his background when he got brought in as a general manager. And as a sort of like analytically driven decision maker, when it comes to the NFL draft, trading back is often always plus value rather than trading up, unless you are trading up for a quarterback who's obviously going to sway wins so far in your direction if you hit. But if you're not necessarily trading up for a quarterback, a lot of times trading back is actually the way that you would want to go. At least that's what the numbers tell you when it comes to just overall success rate. Now, sometimes, of course, there are instances where you go, hey, this guy's really going to help us. Forget the numbers. We understand we're going to get the player that we love. And I think that's the thing that was so interesting about what the Vikings did in the first round this past year, because it makes sense. I thought they played the patient game very well with McCarthy. They didn't just give in to like, oh, we got to trade up to 6 or we got to trade up to 7 or like whatever it was. They were able to stand a little bit, wait a little bit, and then obviously not have to give up a ton to get it from 11 to 10 to go get their guy. Have no problem with that. And in fact, I thought they played that really well. The Dallas Turner move, they gave up a lot to go up to get him from their spot. And I think analytically, they would tell you, okay, trade value of each pick, they would have lost that trade. And I don't think that Adolfo-Mensah was ignorant to that, right? I don't think that he didn't realize that was the case. And yet they looked at this situation, and I know they kind of formulated some comp pick compensation for them later in future years that would help them mitigate this. But they believed that Turner was like a guy who was worth it, right? An exception to the analytical value rule of how you normally play the NFL draft. And so that was such a fascinating part of this offseason, is how the Vikings went about the NFL draft, knowing what we know about Adolfo Mensa as a general manager, knowing how analytically they sort of went against the grain a little bit, certainly with the Dallas Turner pick, but then now looking at their roster and going, man, really good young pass rusher, really good young quarterback. Like, okay, I like those two things in the depth chart, but how they got there, I think, is just a fascinating way to look at how they went about this offseason.
Yeah, that's well stated, Trevor. I think two things off of that, and we could do a whole pod on just this. So I'll try to get us off of this and get onto the other topics. But I think when you're, as an organization, entering a period where your franchise quarterback, or the guy you hope is your franchise quarterback, is on a rookie contract,
Mm-hmm.
I think you're in a different place of management than you are if you're the Bills with Josh Allen, the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, the Dolphins now with Tua. So I think in some ways you can get off the organic path, so to speak, and go eat at the Delmonico Steakhouse every once in a while with free agents or with draft picks, And so I don't want Vikings fans to think they got a steal here with the way they got JJ McCarthy and Dallas Turner, because they actually paid a premium of a price.
Totally.
But I don't think you need to be down about that. There's nothing wrong with going to the best steakhouse in town and getting the best steak on the menu. Have a great meal. Enjoy that,
Right.
But don't think you got a Delmonico steak for an Applebee's price, because you didn't. You paid a premium here. You know what I mean?
No, there's no doubt about it. It's like going to get a premium steak on your birthday, right? I mean, like, that's worth it, because you're selective in kind of when you're going all out. You don't want to do it all like every weekend, because if you do it every weekend, well, all of a sudden you're going to become bankrupt. So I think that is the nuance that gets lost in a lot of analytic talk. Is analytics simply shows you in a vacuum amongst averages what could be smart from a if you did this every single time perspective. But football and team building, I think that people like PFF sometimes gets a bad rap, because sometimes people think that, like, oh, PFF doesn't think that. Me, certainly, I realize that football is not necessarily in the data vacuum that some believe that we believe that it's in. I am fully aware that the game of football and team building is about the ebbs and flows. It's about when you're going all in and when you are rebuilding. And the best franchises in the world are simply the ones that understand where they are in that sort of a timeline. So going back to what you were talking about with quarterbacks, if you have a rookie contract, franchise caliber quarterback, right? It's the most valuable thing in sports. It is. And so when you have that gives you the flexibility to say, go all in, pay a little bit more than you would normally for this edge rusher, because you can, because you have that luxury. So people can look at the move and say, they paid a little bit too much. That's a little bit of an overpay. But it doesn't have to necessarily be an overpay for this team where they're at in their window at that moment. So I think that is not just the discussion point that I like to talk about, but like, that's the fun in all of it. Figuring out when's the time to go all in, when's the time to go against the grain. But no matter who you are out there, in my opinion, the best franchises in the world are the ones that can analytically and correctly assess value on all sorts of situations, whether it's dollars spent on certain positions that bring more value than others, draft pick valuation, and then understanding when you were in a let's put our pedal to the metal, let's go all in mode, and when you need to go, hey, let's get a little bit healthier on the cap. Let's eat our vegetables a little bit here. Let's rebuild. Let's get some higher draft picks. Let's invest in some of our core guys. The best franchises are the ones that understand where they're at in those moments.
Yep. I respect the player evaluation process, and I know that you can't thoroughly tell us what you think of JJ McCarthy even in 10 minutes, but just, high level, what were you when it came to JJ McCarthy? What were you all in on him? Were you he's a couple years away? Where'd you land on him?
Yeah, I was sort of the camp of you draft this guy in the first round, right? Like he gives you first round ability. There's no doubt about it. If
Mhm.
I need one of these quarterbacks to go win me a game week 1 in the NFL, okay, yeah, I mean, he might struggle a little bit because I think it's going to look a little bit different for him, right? Former
Yeah.
5-star, I think he's got an NFL type of arm. I think he's got NFL type of velocity, but he's got a more slender build. I think he's got to put more muscle on him. I think he's got really good torque on how he delivers the ball, the rotations, if you will, of how fast he can spin it. Again, that arm talent is more than just distance, it's velocity. And I think he's got a good amount of it. Some throws that he had last year with Michigan when he was fully confident. I mean, you just see the NFL ceiling with him and how well he played. And I think that confidence is another part of like, wow, look how well he's playing when he gets a lot of confidence around him. And that makes you feel good about him being a first round quarterback of a guy who you could see that at the NFL level too. So I like the NFL baseline physically, right? Does
Okay.
he have the NFL type of arm? I think he does. And he comes from a great NFL offense as well. He seems to be a good kid with a good head on his shoulders, very coachable, which I think is going to be really important for him, whether it was more consistent footwork, again, gaining more muscle, getting a little bit bigger, understanding how to improve and continue to have consistency as a passer as you add a little bit of weight, because that's not always a guarantee either. I think that those things are very important for JJ McCarthy. And then, of course, Michigan was the best team in the country last year. They went undefeated. They won a national championship. They were the best team in the country. And I'm not saying they didn't get tested. They did. But they had the best offensive line in the country. They had the best running game in the country. They had the best
Yep.
defense in the country. They had the best head coach in the country. All of those things, by proxy, make it a little bit easier for JJ McCarthy to do his job. Now, I will say this. McCarthy, and we have some like, how do I say this? Like windows that we like to look at quarterbacks through, like certain situational stipulations for them. One of them I love to look at is 3rd and long. How do you play on 3rd and long when your back's against the wall and when I need you to complete a pass? JJ McCarthy, the only draft eligible quarterback last year who was better than JJ McCarthy on 3rd down in those 3rd and long situations, was actually Bo Nix. And
Okay.
Bo Nix, most of his throws were short of the sticks. So I'm not going to punish him for that, right? He was converting a lot of first downs. He was making a lot of good decisions. But a lot of what he did was, let me get the ball into my playmaker's hands, and then they go out and they make the play, they get the first down. For McCarthy, his success level on 3rd and long situations was beyond the sticks. More than 50% of his first down passes, or I should say his passing attempts on those situations, was beyond the sticks. So he was looking to convert with his arm, which I think
Yeah.
shows you, again, confidence from him. So there's a lot of things, I think, as a very young player, one of the youngest players in the draft class last year, that he needs to continue to build upon as he gets to the NFL level. But the signs, and I think especially how he improved his processing from 2022 to 2023, because I'm not going to lie, I went a year ago, I went into the summer scouting situation with JJ McCarthy. And before last year, I was like, this guy is far away. Doesn't really understand how to deal with pressure, didn't like the footwork, did not like the speed in which he got through his progressions, felt like he really didn't know how to read that at all. I think all of those things improved either a lot or a little this past season in 2023, which again makes you feel like there's a lot more in the tank for him to get better. Just, it's snaps, it's time playing the game at a high level. That's really all that's standing in the way from him and being a pretty dang good quarterback.
Yeah. I admittedly am I think McCarthy's 1 year away from being a starter. Like I think the optimal arc for him is to take over in 2025 offseason program. But
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about the infrastructure at the University of Michigan being a benefit of McCarthy. And I think relatively speaking, when it comes to teams who take a quarterback in the first round, Minnesota does have an infrastructure that can support him. And that begins with the head coach being an offensive minded guy and a former NFL quarterback, but continues through the bookend offensive tackles, TJ Hawkinson when he's healthy, Justin Jefferson, obviously. So I actually spoke earlier this week on Bleav in Vikings that I'm leaving open the slight possibility he plays as soon as this year, when all along I was saying he's a year away. So we'll see what happens there. And part of that is based on Sam Darnold's performance as well, both in training
Mm-hmm.
camp and once the games start.
For sure.
But awesome commentary there on JJ McCarthy. So appreciate that. I wanted to talk about Kyrie Jackson as well, and obviously the unfortunate
Mm.
passing for him, and the emotion of that, and just the human side of that trumps everything. But when we do cast our gaze to the football side of this, Based on your evaluation of Kyrie and the type of career he could have, what kind of adjustment here or what kind of impact is this for the Vikings defense, do you think, when you think about, like, we're building a defense here, we've taken this corner in the third round, but now he's gone? What kind of impact does that have on the Vikings?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it just an extremely tragic situation all around in just so many ways. And when you look at what Jackson was great at, he was a bigger, longer, more athletic corner that they were certainly
Hmm.
taking a chance on, I think, to play a lot more man coverage, right? Somebody
Okay.
who could really man up against receivers on the outside. And when you have a defensive coordinator like Brian Flores, who loves to get aggressive, well, the more bodies you're bringing at the pocket, the more you have to be able to lean on people playing one-on-one in the secondary and in coverage. And to me, Jackson was sort of that roll of the dice for them to say, we're going to go get another player who has the ability to play that sort of man coverage for us. And, I had faith that, Andrew Booth had that kind of athleticism when he was coming out of Clemson. Obviously, we haven't seen that at a starting caliber level for him, but was hoping that we were going to see something there from him. And, then you've obviously got Byron Murphy as well. So in theory, if Jackson would have panned out, well, then, okay, you got Jackson, you got Andrew Booth, who would hopefully take a step in that direction. Byron Murphy, who's been doing it at a decently high level throughout his career. Then all of a sudden you've got the ability to play man coverage across the board. And Flores can continue to get as aggressive as he wants whenever he wants, which I think would have been an important part of their defense. And that was no guarantee that Jackson was going to immediately start in and play right away. But when you think about schematically, him no longer being there, or what Minnesota was trying to do with him, with drafting him, I think that that's what it was. And so again, it sucks, man. It's again a tragic situation all around, and my heart breaks for everybody in that situation. And when you talk about schematically what might be lost from that once you get past the human side of it, I think that is something that we might see Minnesota go more towards in the next, I don't know, maybe some addition, maybe some of the guys that they keep on the roster after roster cuts, or maybe some in-season additions, some additions next year as well,
Yep.
to continue to get more solidified in the man coverage area.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense. And, losing Mekhi Blackman for the season to an injury doesn't help. Shaq Griffin's got a soft tissue injury. That doesn't help. And that's why I bring that up. It's like, this is a room that I think had some youth and promise. And now, because of tragedy and injury, I'm sure Brian Flores feels like it's almost back to the drawing board at a really important position in his defense.
Yep.
Lastly here, I wanted to bring this up with you on the topic of Brian Flores. And I wanted to talk about Monty Kiffin. I know that, Monty Kiffin's got a spot near and dear in your heart. Constructed that Tampa defense, Tampa 2, cover 2 in Tampa Bay. And I just think it's a really cool juxtaposition there to think about Monty Kiffin and what he built, and then think about what I am observing and analyzing in Brian Flores and the Vikings defense. Like, it's just two really great defensive minds, two different ways of doing it. Both ways can work. But, like, the beauty of Monty Kiffin was simplicity and expertise and perfection. And it's like, yep, he wasn't going to bring a bunch of different coverages and confuse the heck out of you. It's just, it was so simple. They got guys who knew how to execute it every single time. And because they didn't vary very much what they did, they knew what you were going to do. And they just beat you in that game. And I think that's a beautiful way to do it. It's an effective way to do it. It's quite different than what we're seeing from Brian Flores, but it's still a good way to do it. You follow me on that?
I do. It also certainly helps when you got 5 Hall of Famers on the defense, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You can play very simple when you do. I mean, Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, Rondé Barber, John Lynch, they're already in the Hall of Fame. I think Simeon Rice deserves to be in the Hall of Fame as well for how talented he was. You throw in guys like Booger McFarland, Brian Kelly, Dexter Jackson. I mean, it was Shelton Quarles. It was, for as much as it obviously was a very talented defense, it was just an unbelievably smart defense as well. I mean, what Derek Brooks was in the middle of that defense, what Rondé Barber was as a nickel corner, they basically could give Rondé Barber full freedom to do whatever he wanted as a nickel defender, and he was so smart, he was able to make things work out. And yeah, it was a defense that, when you make sure that you got to throw in the fact that they had 5 Hall of Famers on that defense, it was sort of we've perfected how we play this. And we are so good and so confident in what we do that we're also not afraid to adjust a little bit from what we've got, because we know it'll be able to counter whatever you have. So You're right. Kiffin, another legend. Rest in peace to him as well. Him, Tony Dungy, what they did in Tampa Bay. Their defenses. I said this on Twitter the week that Monty passed. It was a big reason why I'm a football fan is because it was so fun to watch that Bucs defense growing up, and it's a big reason why I love the game.
Yep. Well said. Well said. Hey, Trevor, thanks a lot for joining us again, everyone. Pro Football Focus lead draft analyst. It's Trevor Sikkema joining us here on Bleav in Vikings. You can find him on X at Tampa Bay Trey, and make sure you check out his podcast, the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, available, I am certain, where all your other favorite podcasts are available, all the major podcast platforms. Go check it out. Hey, Trevor, I hope we can do this again, man. I really enjoyed the conversation. There's so much more I wanted to get with you. Get to with you. So we'll have to cross that bridge at a later time. We'll have you back on Bleav in Vikings soon. All right.
We'll get to it next time that I'm on, Mike. I appreciate it. You having me on, man.
All right. We'll do it again. All right. Thanks, Trevor. That's going to do it for today's episode of Bleav in Vikings with Wabi. Thank you all for listening. And remember, until next time, keep believing.